Really what Jane offers us today is an account of what's breaking through, in essence, this veil of illusion, or this matrix, if you want to use that word, and understanding the human connection to the cosmos and also to the galactic beings. And her account is very authentic and heartfelt. So please make welcome Jane Pooley.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi and welcome. So yeah, I'm Jane, and I'm going to tell you about the grey race of people and my children. Can I just ask if anybody here knows nothing about the UFO phenomenon? Okay, so I want to say the right thing for that.
We can't hear very well.
We're on? So I'm just asking how many of you don't know anything about the alien happenings? So just firstly, just an overview, my understanding of what's happened in society is that President Eisenhower in the mid-50s made an agreement with the grey aliens to take some of us to experiment on in exchange for technology. And we weren't supposed to remember, that was the deal. But for me, my children are why I remember. My maternal instinct is strong. I guess my personality is strong, and I fought through. And I obviously don't remember everything that happened, but I remember enough to know what's going on. Now, since writing my book and coming out publicly, countless men and women, but mostly women, have come to me privately or written to me and said, me too. You know, thanks for coming out, I couldn't speak about it. So it's happening, and it's coming to a head in society, and with any luck, in the near future, we'll have aliens walking amongst us. Now, it's been said before, I don't like the word aliens either. To me, they're people from other planets, exactly like us, only born on another planet instead of another country. They're not exactly like us, but they're human-like. So, but they have families, a body, a soul, love, culture, public transport system, all of those things which I'll get to. So that's how I view them. I'm not viewing them as interdimensional beings or any of those other suggestions that are out there. My experience is with people. We've done that, I think. Okay, so this is actually an example of humalien. I actually did make up the word, or I believed that I did, but it's out there now, and that's good. It's just a switch for the word hybrid because I thought it sounded friendlier. Nothing more. This girl you might recognise, hands up if you do. Great. So, and I have been given permission to use the picture, that's important to me. So her name on Earth is Suri, and I met her on the mothership, where I also met my humalien children, and she was teaching my granddaughter, which blows my mind away. So I've been talking about her for a number of years, and a good friend of mine brought some photographs to me and said, does she look like this? She doesn't look like this, that's her. So, you know, that's pretty mind-blowing when somebody on the other side of the world has this as a daughter, this girl as a daughter, and I've actually met her. So she exists. It's not for me to say names. If you know whose daughter it is, that's fantastic. But she does have, see how she's got the eyes? See her eye sockets like that? Slopes up like that. So she's part human and part grey. And see her eyebrows, how they slope up? And her nose and her jaw seems to be pulled forward. So the greys, their grey traits, have a very different head shape to us. Their skulls almost have bumps at the back. And it's not quite a division, but it's just squared off, different shape to ours. So she's got all of that, and she's little. And it's suggested that she might not have a little finger. She's hiding them here. So I believe that to be a real humalien. That's the best example I can give you. So that's just my hand with a grey hand over it. That's just my interpretation. Now, I'm not a true artist, so it doesn't matter, but oh, sorry. It just shows you the difference. They've got their little fingers missing. They've got the same number of joints, but their fingers are longer and thinner, and they've got skin, but they're almost bone-like. That's a grey eye that I've drawn to the best of my memory that's haunted me all my life. And that was a psychic at another conference who was doing drawings, and look what he did. So it's pretty accurate. There's me with greys on a table. It's dreadful of me, but you know, the artist was supposed to be a caricature. He even gave me a belly. Okay, so this just represents, you've seen this picture before, you know, I got them all off the internet and got consent. But there's a human child and an alien child. To me, exactly the same, different features. I'm a big equalist, and that includes these greys. Some examples of spaceships that I think are probably real. That one's probably a drawing, but or whatever, it's, you know, computer animated, generated, but it's pretty close to the real thing, so that's why I put it up there. I think that's probably a real one, but it'd be an older style. I suggest that's real, and that's actually one of mine. So that shape shift, that shape ship is lit by some sort of red light. So they have, you know about infrared light, obviously, but they have something different altogether, and they surround their ships in light, and so we see a red orb in the sky. But when they turn the lights off, that's what you get. So, you know, and I've seen enough to know that. And just on that note, I've noticed in my observation, I'm no expert, I can only tell you what I saw, that white is high speed, green is medium speed, and red is when they're just going very slowly or stationary. And I think it's all as simple as I'm making it out, frankly. I think we put a lot of things on it that perhaps aren't there. So my first memory, I was under 2, I was in a cot, and I remember very clearly, a grey man was at the end of my cot with the big eyes that I drew before, and he said to me, and I'm not sure it was, I am like your grandfather or I am your grandfather. Never quite got that straight in my head. Which one did he say? But he was lovely. You know, a toddler would go off with a relative, wouldn't they? And I didn't know any different because he was just there. So he picked me up, and I was on his right hip, and we floated up in what I call the light elevator, which is a tube of white light. And the lights, dashes of light in a brick pattern, were swirling around me. And inside, I couldn't see those lights, but I felt like I was floating up in water, even though I could breathe. And then, because I was on Graham's hip as a baby, we rose up and we stood on the side of the light hole at the bottom of the ship. And there we were, and then the door closed over, and I couldn't see any scenes. So that's my first entry into a spaceship. And because it's been happening all my life, it's become my norm. So I don't see it as strange anymore. I really don't know any other way. Okay. Now, when I was older and I was taken up in that light tunnel, I also remember going through the ceiling. Now, don't ask me the technology, well, ask me, but I'm not going to be able to tell you. I don't understand it, but I know what happened. I went through the ceiling, but I wasn't changed, the ceiling was. And how do I know it was my body and not just an out-of-body experience, perhaps? Well, I sneezed. The dust in the roof was there. Now, your soul probably doesn't sneeze at dust. And I remember seeing a cockroach. Yuck. So, yeah, it is like the density of water, I guess. And while I was in the spaceship on their very first visit, I had a test. It was medical tests. They took my blood, but it wasn't a needle. It felt like they were sucking it out, and I didn't have a hole in the skin. And then another grey waved his hand over my belly, it's a baby's belly, and in the air floated my organs. Now, obviously, as a child, I had no idea what that was. It was just something pretty floating in the air. But as an adult, I look back and think it was a scan in the version of a hologram. Now, we have holograms here on Earth, but I'm 57. We didn't have them then. So, you know, really, they're just, as I keep saying, people like us with better planes, or more technologically advanced. So the next time, and the only time in my life I was frightened, was between 7 and 8, the year I turned 8. I knew they were coming, and I was terrified, and I wouldn't sleep. And I called out for my mother, and she didn't come. And then my heart was racing in my ears, and I finally went to sleep, and then I woke up floating mid-air between the bed and the ceiling. And I screamed, and I called out, "Mummy, mummy," because, you know, I was a child. And I was so frightened. I've never been so frightened in my life, and I probably never will be again. I couldn't move, no sound was coming out, and I heard a voice, probably telepathically, but I appeared to hear a man's voice saying, "Oh, she's not supposed to wake up." But sometimes when you're that frightened or that emotional, or, you know, like for my children, that loving, you do push through these things. What do they do to us? I don't know, but I suggest that they anaesthetise us or sedate us or hypnotise us. I'm sure you've all heard of implants. I'm onto my 3rd behind my ear. Maybe they do something through that. Yeah, shows up on scans, on x-rays. So, you know, there's actually a lot of physical evidence, if not proof, out there for people like me. I'm only an example of things that are happening to us. Okay, so when I was in my teens, the year I turned 14, there seems to be a pattern too. You know, other people are giving me the same ages, which surprised me at first, but it's a consistent pattern. I am psychic. I know a lot of us are, but it seemed to be heightened then at puberty. I was late to puberty, so it was then. And I was shown my future children. I hadn't even met my now ex-husband. And I was told about their lives, and that's all happening. And I really believed at some point that I could float or levitate or fly, which might sound like a delusion, but I wasn't walking around thinking I can. But I believed it in my head because I'd been doing it on the spaceship. So I had a birthday party when I was 16, and I've still got friends today that will attest to the truth of this. We did one of those put your little finger at the bottom of the chair levitating things that kids do, and I just went, and they just freaked and dropped me. But I was doing it, and it's because I really believed it. Now, could I do it now? No, of course not. But I can on the spaceship. But at that stage, it seemed to, you know, be at its strongest. I've always seen a lot of UFOs, ridiculous number of UFOs. Look up, there's several, you know, like the episodes of 7 at a time, or 11, and I don't know, I've never really looked up and not seen any, and at my age, that adds up to quite a few. They do come in spate. I've also noticed a pattern with people talking to me that when it's silent for me, it's silent for them too. So they've obviously got a highly organised program. And it's very much like us having a science experiment in a lab, and we're the lab rats, which sounds awful, but it's the truth, isn't it? So, you know, I really like the Greys. They've always been kind to me and gentle, but there is an upside and a downside to this. I wouldn't swap my life for the world, but I wouldn't wish it upon anybody either. It's not something you'd choose. I've loved being on spaceships, and I've loved the Greys, and I know some by name. And I obviously love my children, but they took 3 of my babies under anaesthetic without my consent, basically. And I still to this day have nightmares about missing children. And all last week, getting ready to speak to you, and this is very personal, but I think it's important to help get the message out. I had a repeated nightmare about 3 toddlers sitting around a dinner table, and I went to the bathroom, and when I came back they were gone. And I kept ringing 000 and the phone rang out. Nobody answered, and I couldn't find my children, and no one would help me, and no one knew. So, you know, there's the grief around that, and of course I've cried and grieved. And so I try and present a very positive outlook on the Greys, and I believe that too. So, you know, it's not really contradictory, but there's that. I do also feel, I've got this imaginary friend, but he's not really. Graham is his nickname. It's the same man that picked me up when I was a baby in the cot and still collects me each time. Yes, he's aged, and the skin melts rather than wrinkles. So, you know, they've just got different textured skin to us, but they do age too. Oh, this is an interesting story. So then I went nursing. Ordinary, average person, but yet this group of professors at, I can say some, I'll say the names of the dead ones, but not the live ones, at a well-known Sydney hospital took a very big interest in me because as first-year students we donated blood and I was called back and told I wasn't to give blood anymore and I was to go and see this group of professors. Now, one of them was the one that discovered AIDS and the other one was Victor Chang, the first heart transplant man, and then there's another one that's still alive. They said to me privately, you have the blood profile of an astronaut, and obviously you're not an astronaut, you're just a kid. And we believe you're an alien abductee. Well, I didn't know what they were talking about then. I had some memories, but I hadn't had the babies, I hadn't seen what I've now seen. And they seemed to think that I could answer their questions, but I couldn't. I really couldn't. But now I think I could. I was offered a unit to live in. I rented a unit from one of them. You know, they very much watched me and helped me. They were kind to me. And I'd go and pay my rent in a private office at the back of this hospital and I'd say, what are you doing? Albert, his first name. What are you doing, Albert? And he'd say, sandwich in one hand, scalpel in the other, I'm doing a heart transplant on a dog. And this is before all this had come to light. So I'm seeing all this well before the public. So I was privy to a lot of that sort of thing. Now, Albert said to me it's come from alien technology. And I was also told that about endoscopies, you know, light bending technology. And again, you know what that is today, but 30, 40 years ago we didn't. I was told laparoscopies came from aliens. Now the way, just deviating a bit, but the way it feels when they take me feels like a drug called midazolam. I can only relate it to what I know. And that's a light anaesthetic many of you would have had for a test that makes you conscious but cooperative. So it's a chemical hypnotic. Now, dinner party, private house, anaesthetist and his wife and my husband, he said to me that drug came from alien technology as well. The aliens gave it to us in the exchange of taking abductees for tech. And it was also used during the Cold War as truth serum. Well, here's a funny story. I had a bronchoscopy not very long ago, and I don't tell everybody this stuff. You know, I'm very selective who I tell, but I'm midazolammed. And I'm telling the entire medical team about my alien experiences. No, I didn't know until the specialist told me afterwards. I'm going, oh my God, truth serum. Oh, I was then taken, there were 4 or 5 other student nurses, probably just for cover, but it was me they were focusing on, to a locked room in the dungeon of St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, and I swear it's still there, to an old-fashioned specimen library like you'd see in the Frankenstein Museum. And I walked straight up to an alien baby, fully, like dead, but probably 9 months gestation or whatever, and the professor, lecturer that had taken us there said, that's exactly what we wanted to see if you went straight for that. So I've seen them on Earth as well. You know, it's happening and it's not airy-fairy and it's not hippie stuff. It really is happening. And a lot of the medical field, there must be nurses in the audience. You've seen stuff. It might be the same stuff as me, but we see weird stuff. We really do. So it's happening. So then with my first pregnancy, and there's a lot I can't tell you in 45 minutes clearly, I've written a little book, or you're welcome to ask me questions or write to me online. But what I remember most clearly is I went up in the light elevator through the roof again, and I'm just a bit careful about personal stuff, you know, I've got to protect my family's identity, obviously. So I conceived my first child, and on my next visit, here's me laying on the table. I didn't do this drawing, obviously, and there's that hologram scan above me of my baby. And today's 3D baby scans are still nowhere near as good as theirs. And that child is now 34. So, you know, they're just ahead. Okay. I was once asked how many UFOs I've seen, and I haven't actually sat down and counted. I certainly haven't kept records. But when I think about seeing groups of them, often, you know, months of gaps, but then lots at a time, there must be hundreds, even into the thousands, that I've seen. I've taken a couple of photos, but the truth is I'm too busy staring. Or the camera dies, you know, the phone battery drains, or it's just not something I think about. But for anybody, if you look up, way up, there's a highway up there, and they're there all the time. There are so many. You can very easily tell the difference between a spaceship and say, a comet or the ISS. Spaceships move in odd angles, sharp angles, high speed. They're very high up, much higher than a plane or a helicopter. And they're either white, red or green. But I must say most up that high, going that fast, are white. So then, the father of my humalien children is human, and baby's conceived in the usual way, but they remove the fetus a number of times during the pregnancy and surgically insert grey alien DNA. Now, from memory, I'm laying on the bed crying, "Don't take my baby, don't take my baby," and my friend Graham is stroking my arm with his hand, so I know what his skin feels like. And they put some sort of blanket over me. The joke is a space blanket, but some material that we don't have here. And they were nothing but kind. But being the nurse I am, it's like questions. I want to go and see, what are you doing? And I couldn't. They said, no, you have to lay there, or obviously you'll bleed. So I didn't see what was done in this room. That's just the truth of it. But I was told that they were splicing in alien DNA. So the babies get some from our family bloodline, and I think possibly my father was one. He was in the army shortly after Roswell. I suspect that. But I know that at least one of my 2 children on Earth was taken, because he used to tell stories, and I know that one of my 14-year-old granddaughter is regularly taken. She knows too much to be making it up, you know? And it matches my stories. So I've seen a triangle spaceship, and I had another witness. A girlfriend was staying in my house, and we saw this light up high, and at first I went, oh, it's a plane. She says, it's too high. I said, yeah, you're right. And it came in at very high speed right down to us. We thought it was going to crash. Stopped abruptly right above my roof and above my backyard. And it was a massive triangle about the size of this room. And they turned all their lights off, and anyway, it was daylight. It was like, I don't know, just before 6 at night in summer. And they flew very slowly, very low down my driveway, and I ran out the front and followed it, looking, and it was so exciting, that close. I imagined it was their new car, and they were showing it off. Their new model, yeah. Then there's another sighting. I'm just sort of highlighting a few here, but I was on Birdie Beach at night near Newcastle with a friend, so again, another witness. And we're sitting on the beach, and he said, look to your left, Jane. And I said, yeah, there's a lighthouse on the point. What's wrong with you? And he said, all right, look to your right. And there was a lighthouse up there. So I agreed it wasn't a lighthouse. And then he said, so what's above it? What colour are those 2 stars? I said, green. Stars aren't green, are they? So there was this massive UFO, but it was well camouflaged as a full moon, basically. It didn't have the markings on it. And if you looked twice, it obviously wasn't the moon. And it was sitting on the headland. And there were 2 green stars coming down, going out, coming down, going out. So they were clearly scouting the area. And they weren't green stars, they were green spaceships, but I didn't know that then. So the next day I told a friend who didn't believe me. So I rang the police at Newcastle and said, I just want to know if you had any other reports and if you believe in spaceships or UFOs. And he said, well, I didn't, but you're caller number 20. So, you know, believe it or not, I know what I saw. The father on Earth, anyway, I got sidetracked. I met him, he saw me speak, and he tracked me down, and I know him on Earth, and I recognise him from the spaceship, and it just blows my mind. And then on that note, I also know 3 women, 2 of which I remember on the spaceship. One was the one time I was terrified, and I was They put us in groups of children, by the way, and you stay with those groups of children all your life. So on this time, I remember holding this person's hand and looking up at her face. So she would have been about 14, I would have been about 7 or 8. And then on another occasion, I remember another woman who's now my friend, and it was the same deal. She was a little kid and I was holding her hand. Clearly, like so clearly. But at times of stress, like great fear, you do remember things like that. So then there's a woman in America who called Gabriella, it doesn't matter what her surname is, and she found me after going on Studio 10 because she recognised me from the ship and the group of children. I don't remember Gabriella, but I don't have any doubts that she's telling the truth. None. And she said that she kind of woke up from the anaesthetic or whatever it is, and I was the woman sitting opposite her and the child, and she'd seen me. I mean, she's got such a similar story. I do believe her, I instinctively believe her, but even if I didn't, that, you know, the facts remain. Oh, and then there's probably the most important one. On New Year's Eve from 2011 to 2012 on Gosford waterfront, there were 5 red orbs, but they were spaceships lit, because as I said later, I saw them without their lights. And there were thousands of people on the shorefront because it was fireworks time. And there was a police boat parked only as far, about double to the camera. So in front of me, I could see the police walking, I could hear their voices, not quite what they said, and I could see the word police. So after the fireworks, and we were in an estuary watching from the other side, the 5 red spaceships that had been watching the fireworks came down, and very slowly, this took 10 minutes. I did video it, it's another story, and just went really close in front of us, as close as the camera. So we're looking, are you kidding? You are kidding me. My granddaughter was with me. She saw them too. I rang the police to report it. I've given up reporting them now, but at that stage I did. And the police woman that answered the phone said, we're not bothering to deny it. And I said, good, because I saw you. Not you, but the police. And a police helicopter and 2 black helicopters, probably army, but you know those big ones, went trying to chase them. And the spaceships were playful. And they were going really slowly and letting them catch up, and then they'd shoot off, and it was really quite funny to watch. It was hysterical. It was like kids were driving the spaceships and teasing the police and the army blokes, and it was no accident. You know, it wasn't a freak of nature. It was definitely mechanical and definitely intelligent. Right, so a lot of alien experiences will tell you they've got implants. They do show up on scans and x-rays. I've seen them myself in emergency departments in other people. One of my sons on Earth had a brain tumour, unfortunately, but when he was being scanned, I was in the room with the radiologists behind the radiation screen, and they said to me, or no, they said to each other, alien implant. They looked straight at the tumour and said, and I went, oh, really? And they said, oh God, we forgot Mother was in the room. I said, it's all right, tell me, I believe in aliens. And anyway, it was a hole with an encapsulated growth around it. It wasn't malignant, but still a problem. And something in there, because this is what the body does. It had dissolved that something, suggested to be an implant, and created a capsule around it to protect itself, as you would with pus, but it was other tissue. And then the body had eaten that, but the tumour had remained. And I hadn't thought about that. I thought that was quite logical, the way they explained that. I now have one behind my ear, and it is, you can feel it. It's a little hard, not biological, probably metal lump, and it kind of buzzes sometimes and annoys me other times. But it's my 3rd. The first one was in my left nostril, and my nose wouldn't stop bleeding as a child, and I think they removed it because I had like a massive nosebleed. And then the next one was in my knee, and there was a scar, and it looked like I'd fallen over perhaps, but until my 30s, it kept coming to the fore, you know, to the front of my skin, and then passing up and then rejecting and going back in. And eventually it came to a head, and I was kneeling on carpet, and it got caught and ripped out. Now, it looked like quartz. It wasn't quartz, but that's the best I can give you. It telescoped into itself. So it was a dot, but then it telescoped out to about that size. Blew my mind. It's like nothing on earth. So then the same night that came out, I woke up the next morning with the one behind my ear, and it was just really annoying me and really inflamed. But also on that night, my dog had barked a lot, and I'd gone out the back to look, and there was a big full moon type spaceship hanging over my backyard. So a big white lit orb. And I actually waved and said, "Hi guys," and was about to run out and see them. So it's like that with them. I really quite like them. And I felt compelled to go to sleep and like put to sleep, couldn't stay awake. So I went back to bed, and in the morning I'd forgotten. But on my way to work, on the radio, and it was 2WS before it was FM, and the radio announcer was Hans Torv. You don't forget things like that. I wouldn't normally remember that, but it just, wow, that's when the memory came back. And Hans said there was a man, a human man, like a cattle mutilation, found at this address behind the back fence, my place. So when I got to work, I rang the police and said, "I know something about that. I saw something last night." And the police put me onto the sergeant, station sergeant, and he said, I swear he said, "Case closed, it's not human." And he didn't want to know what I knew. And so I then rang the radio station and said, "Could you tell me?" And they put me onto the station manager, who was just obviously in shock, and he said, "We've been told to pull the story, I can't discuss it with you." Bang. Now I told this story at a talk, at Lorraine's group actually, and somebody stood up and said, "I remember that day, I heard it on the radio too." Don't you love it when other witnesses come out? Yeah. All right, so you know there's lots of police involvement and evidence, and what was happening that night is probably the scary bit. I think that he was breaking in to kill me and my children, and I think that the Greys killed him. They're not killers, but they will protect their own. That's pretty big, isn't it? Did anybody suspect me of murder? Of course not. But you know, oh my God, I was the reason. Now, just in the name of disclosure, I was also working for a drug company, and I was in a research project, and so at the time I thought it was about that, but it wasn't. It was the alien stuff. I now know that in hindsight. But you know, it's natural, isn't it, to look for other explanations. Okay, so then there came a time, now I've only mentioned one of the pregnancies, but there were three. And there came a time where in my head, remember that the Greys speak telepathically, and I've got a microchip, which is like a tracking thing for sharks or dogs, pet microchips, that's all it is. Just, you know, a bit better than ours. For whatever reason, they heard my thoughts, and I was chucking a wobbly, angry. You know, it's affected my health, and you stole my children, and I've had enough, and I want to understand. Seriously, chucking a wobbly. So, which is fair enough, don't you think? So, not that night, but the next night, I was gone for between 13 and 15 hours, and I have full recall, and I don't think I've ever had full recall. I was taken in a little ship, flown up high, flew into the light hole at the bottom of a big ship, and given a tour of this mothership. There are a number of different sized ships. There's at least one in the middle that's like a lab ship or a hospital ship. And then there's little ones in there. So what happened when I got there, I found myself walking in a corridor. The corridors were in a circle around the ship. It was huge. I couldn't see from one side to the other. It was like a whole country in there. So the first thing, my first question, they're very phlegmatic is the word. They don't show emotion. And they're very sort of straight-laced, but they project emotion and they project thoughts. And so Graham obviously was hearing the things that I was thinking. And my first question was, can't I come and stay here for 2 weeks and see my children? Can't I have a holiday? And if I did, where would I live? And can I bring my toothbrush and my eyebrow tweezers? My clean undies? And, you know. So they were my stupid questions. But, you know, under that sort of pressure, that's what you think. You don't think the logical questions that you think of asking afterwards. So he showed me a room, and to open the door of the room, he went like that, and where there wasn't a door, one appeared and slid open. I couldn't see any joins, and when it closed, it didn't appear to be there again. I laughed. Graham said he had a microchip in his hand. That's everything. It's like our mobile phones, it's like our keys, it's like our diaries, it's our monetary system. Everything is in a microchip in their hand. And so if one person doesn't have access to a particular area, their microchip isn't programmed to that room. And Graham obviously does. So he showed me in this room that no one was living. And against the wall was was more oval than round window, and I could see the stars. Again, the window, where were the joins? Where was the surround of the window? It was just from clear whatever, glass to the metal, and it just seemed to blend into each other. So their workmanship is beautiful from an artistic point of view. And I can see the stars out there, and I tell you, there's nothing that compares to the stars up there. And can I imagine that up? No. Like not even like the ISS photographs. It's just so beautiful, and it's so silent that even when it's quiet on Earth, I think it's noisy now. If I think of that, so silent and so peaceful. It's really quite a beautiful experience. So then I'm thinking, well, where do I sleep? That bed looks cold. It's silver metal. And Graham says, sit on it. So I sit on it. It's all spongy and warm. So they just have different materials till we do. But it was also built in. It was just the whole room looked like it was moulded. There wasn't a single rivet or join or obvious cut or work. It may as well have been poured into a mould and stuck in there. I don't know how they make it, but that's just how it appeared. So then in the other corner, but it was a round room, but next to the door on the left of the door was a seat that felt just like the bed. And then on the other side of the door was a cupboard that Graham opened the same way, and it only had 2 shelves. I went, well, hang on, all my stuff's not going to fit in there. So that's it. He said, we don't have a lot of material possessions. Everything's in there. They wear onesies, like Bond's onesies for babies. It's all very streamlined. They don't have hair, so what are they on a brush for, or a shaver? So it's true. So we just seem to need, or think we need, more things than they do. So then we went down the hallway to another room, down the round hallway, and he opened the door again, and there was that girl, the girl that I showed you at the beginning. And she was sitting on a levitating stool, so I couldn't see any legs, and she was reading a book. And of course that shocked me because everything else was so futuristic. And I asked Graham why, and he said she's teaching the humalien children human history, human culture. And they wanted me to do things like show them hugs and trees and art, because I love art. But there was a baby sitting in the room. It's so clear in my mind, it's not funny. And she was just leaning on her left hand like that, so she was only just sitting up. And she looked at me with these big alien eyes, but she looked quite human too, and smiled as if she knew me. And Graham said, that's your granddaughter. And she was, I knew she was, I just knew instantly. It was just so beautiful. So, yeah, that's certainly, Suri's not a name up there, I can tell you, but that's the one that her parents have given her here, that when I asked for the consent, she said that's her name. She's the prettiest girl. That photo doesn't show it. It's really pretty. Probably because she looks a bit different, I guess, her bone structure, but I thought she was just gorgeous. She was about 5 years older than that when I saw her, and then when I asked to use the picture, the woman said yes, the photo was 5 years old. So, everything sort of matches and ties in when you start to ask questions. So then we go to another room, but to go to this room we have to fly across the ship. And I remember I said it's like a whole country and I can't see the other side. So they have a public transport system where pods, cool pods, like glass perspex, whatever, basically egg-shaped pods with a platform and something to hang on to. Can't see any buttons. And they're docked into the veranda at intervals. And you don't pay because he's got a microchip, and I was with him. And he got in one and I got in another, and I'm thinking, yeah, great, so what do I do now? And Graham, he just laughs at me and he says, you've flown them before, but I honestly didn't remember. So he said, just follow me. So I thought, oh, I'll just follow him and the ship just goes wherever you think. This is the train system. So that bit was fun, I have to say. So while I'm flying and I look down, and in the centre of the ship, but not, again it seems to be floating because there's the light hole under it and there's other things over it, is a park. Like, do you expect to see a park in a spaceship? Grass, pots, trees. And I said, why? And he said, again, we take the children down there, we're teaching them about Earth. There was even a levitating bench seat. It was quite beautiful. He said, obviously they give oxygen, all of that thing, but it's not what I would imagine is in a spaceship if I were to make this up, basically. So then we went to another room, and he obviously must have been fairly high up the scale of whatever, scientists or the breeding program. And we went in there and there were workers all over. There were hundreds of workers at levitating benches again, doing something scientific. And the walls were lined with what I can only equate to slides, you know, that go under a microscope, but much thinner. So it just seemed to me to be lines of glass or something. And I asked, and Graham said, it's DNA, not just from people, but plants, animals, everything from all over the universe. He said, you've got no idea, you're way behind. Also, us, the public, were only told about DNA in the early 90s. This was, you know, way before all that, so I didn't really understand, but that's what he told me, and it's now obviously more within my grasp to understand. And he said, no, I said, oh, like Noah's Ark. So, you know, if planets blow up, you've got all this, but instead of the animals or the people, it's their DNA. So it's not even seeds, it's just DNA. So, and he told me that the DNA is much more complex than humans have ever discovered now. There's so much more to it. And he said to me that their historical memories are stored on their DNA, and so they want to, their planet died off for whatever reason, natural catastrophe I think, and they knew, and that's why they built this massive artificial planet, and they're looking for another planet to live on. And whilst I've said they're like us and I see them as equals, they can really only stay here for a few hours without getting sick, just like I get sick when I go up there. So they're doing it over generations, breeding in. So yes, there are humaliens here already, but the next generation we seem to be coming up to the real ones. So, like, not the real ones, the more alien ones. So I see and hope for a future where I can see some grey people sitting in here amongst you and not bat an eyelid. I really do. And that might sound idealistic, but I think it'll happen. Yeah. So then, yeah, so they have a society, they have families, they have schools, or they have dining rooms. They tend to be more of a community than we are, rather than cooking in their individual ones. They have partners, husbands, whatever. But the next room I went into, I saw 3 elders, priests, judges, I don't know what you want to call them, but they were the words that were in my head when I was seeing them. And they were very tall greys, I think, grey-like faces, taller than the rest of them, long white robes, which could have been hiding anything. And they too were on levitating stools, so it's a bit hard to guess exactly how tall, but I'm thinking like 7 to 9 foot between the 3 of them, you know, somewhere between that. And I'm then shown, like a video I suppose, but it's a hologram again, of me when I was younger and the human father of my children consenting in front of 3 witnesses or 3 judges. And I went away thinking, oh, well, that's good then, all right, then I consented. But, you know, I didn't consent. It wasn't informed consent. I didn't give them permission to take my children, and I didn't know what was ahead. So, you know, there's something, and they've tried, but as a close friend of mine said, it's like being date raped, Rohypnol, and then you know. So I'm saying more negative things today because that's the place I am in my journey of going through the grief of it. And I think that it's really important because not everyone can say, oh, I like them and oh, that was fun. A lot of people are scared or distressed or grieving. And, you know, it is all there. PTSD, nightmares, I just try and present as best I can, but hopefully you can see in my face that, you know, there's another side to this, so apart from the fun. And I'm angry with Eisenhower for making a deal, you know. Okay, we got tech, but what about us? Amelia was my granddaughter, so I told you about her. Yeah, so I saw, just backtracking, but before I realised there was a microchip in his hand, I saw Graham walk towards the wall and I actually thought, oh, he's going to bump into it. And he turns around and he laughs. Greys don't laugh. So I taught him to laugh and his whole body shakes and he looks so funny. He just looks like it's so unnatural. So that sends me into fits of giggles. And then I get the explanation about the microchip. So I actually really love this man and it's his DNA in me, and I guess he is my grandfather if I look at it that way, but it's surgical DNA, surgically implanted, not my grandmother had sex with an alien, you know. Yeah, so money, they don't have any money, they just have point systems. They do have money, but it's not cash. It's points on there. So everybody has a job. I noticed that there wasn't much crime. Now, I'm not saying it was utopian, but I noticed that it was quiet and everybody seemed well behaved and there were no drugs or graffiti or, you know, loud noises. And so I mentioned this to Graham and he said, again, he said, you're not going to like all my answers, Jane. You're going to have issues with some of the things I say. And he said, well, we have the death penalty. So we deal very harshly and people just toe the line because otherwise they're gone. So, you know, I mean, he did answer me. I have to give him that, even though he knew I wouldn't like the answer. Okay, how are we going for time, Anthony? Wherever you are? No, we're right? Can't see him. All right, so that's somebody else's example, but that looks like a park on the mothership, or at least it reminds me of that, so it illustrates it. Now, this photo, I'm sure you've all seen on the internet now, yeah? Most of you. Well, remember I said to you that I chucked a tantrum in my head and not that night, but the next night I was taken to the mothership and shown all these things? Well, I was then sent an email into my inbox with no return address with a video of that ship as seen by the International Space Station, who are the first to own it. That photo, somebody else in the States has used, some theme park thingy, but my computer was totally trashed, along with my videos, along with so much that you can imagine. Otherwise, I could give you this. Too much of a coincidence, you know. So I then wrote to the ISS, and it was at the time that Chris Hadfield was the astronaut there. And I just said to him, I'm just writing a little book, it's, you know, it's no big deal, nobody's really going to see it, it's just for personal use, which is not what's happened, is it? May I put that on the cover? Because I just want to cover all the legal aspects of consent. And he wrote back to me, and he just signed it Chris, not Hadfield, and he said, oh, look, it's all over the internet, just use it. I don't know how to get you permission, but his permission, you know, in writing. Didn't for a second try and deny that it had been seen from the International Space Station on the night I was on it. That's cool, don't you think? So I stand by that photo, no matter what people say. Sorry. That's it. Right, so these are my own photos. They're not great. They're only on my phone, but there's something that says something was there at the time that I saw these things. So when I zoom in on them, that's what I get. And see that green, luminescent green, that's definitely one of theirs. They seem to have colours we don't have, even light shades we don't have, physical matter that we don't have, like not just solids, airs, gas and plasma, but other things that we haven't yet discovered. And you know, the red light, and there's a little green light there, so that's just zooming in. That one obviously, those two are, this is Gosford waterfront at night, that's just lights. And it's clearly pixelated. I'm not claiming that they're great mothership, great spaceship things, but I know what I saw with my eyes and it's evidence that I saw something. Okay, so a couple of days after, no, it would have been 5 days after, I saw the waterfront 5 orbs going across in front of us, and it was 10 to 5 at night, and I was at an intersection in peak hour on the Central Coast. On my right was a secret army base that all the Central Coasties know is there. And low overhead flies a police helicopter, really low, like the ceiling, just above the trees and the wires, with a spaceship, like I showed you before, attached to the underbelly. I just stopped there. The light was red, so I had time to look. And I'm looking around. Can everybody see this? And they could. There was no secret about it. It was like the police were making a statement, somebody said to me. So, you know, like they were saying, see, we got them. And I just thought it was a broken down spaceship or a parked one and they'd gotten it. And they went into this army base that you can't get into and disappeared. So your guess is as good as mine, but that's where it went. I'm certainly not the only one that saw that either. Okay, so I've only got a few minutes left, but I've talked about what it's like in the light elevator. These are just examples. I woke up one night mid-air, that's what it felt like. I haven't seen red lights, but the light tunnel looks like that. I've been through the ceiling, but others have reported going through walls. There was one time where I came back from a visit and my ex-husband and I had a newsagents at that stage and we lived above it. And I was coming back and Graham said, walk through the door. I said, it's locked. I can't walk through the door. I bumped my head. And he went, oh, for God's sake. And he put his arms around me and he walked through it with me and we walked through the door. I don't know how they do it, but it's tech. It's not ghosty stuff. So I guess in future we'll understand it. When we were children, did we ever think we'd have a computer in our pockets, in our phones? So it really is. Just imagine a bit far into the future, our children's tech, that's all it is, just more advanced. None of it's magic, none of it's paranormal, what's paranormal, but none of it's supernatural, just tech. I think that's a real one. Not my photo, but I think it's real. This is obviously a drawing, but it's an example of them looking into your eyes and working over you, over me, over you, over whoever else has been there. All right, so I'd just like to do this if that's all right. We've got time, Anthony?
Yeah, we've got time.
Okay, so I've just not done this before. What I've given you is all fact, observation, what I witnessed, no slant. This is opinion, which is very different. I think that it started with Roswell and the Eisenhower thing. So just to recap, I think that they put us in groups of children from birth and that they DNA match us and for parenting, like one man, one woman. There's no overlaps. Obviously, you can't breed. One man said to me, oh, I probably got 9 wives. I went, no. So, they match you by DNA. Does your DNA match? As I said, I now know 4 women and 1 man on this earth that have witnessed the same things, that were on the same spaceship, that I've met multiple times, and now we're friends, which I think is really nice. There seems to be 6 or 7 years gaps between each, not exact, but that's just in my observation, each new batch of children, for whatever reason. Each toddler is allocated an older child to make sure they're okay. And I remember being told to look after a little boy. You've got to make sure he's okay. He's only little, and I was only little too, but I was old enough to babysit, I suppose. That group stays together for life. The same grade person or caseworker or DNA donor or scientist, whatever you want to call them, stays with the same group. I have seen Graham every time I've gone. He's come to collect me. So there are other grades there, but he's my number 1 person. And so the fear from when I was a child, I now see Graham's eyes and I'm fine. Oh, Graham's here. It's all right, I'm safe. So, there does seem to have been a great influx in the 50s and 60s, I've noticed. And I wouldn't say it's stopped or it's slowing down. Maybe that's just my generation, so I'm noticing that. But I am noticing that seemed to be the largest group. Perhaps more now are already humalien and already part grey enough to live on Earth. But there are still younger ones coming through that are being taken. There's an extremely high incidence of autoimmune diseases in abductees who have carried alien babies in their uteruses. It's like rejection syndrome. If I give you a heart transplant, well, I don't. If someone gives you a heart transplant and you develop a rejection disorder and we have to give you medication to stop that, that's what's happened. And I got really sick when I had my first part alien pregnancy. But I'm only just in the last few years realising that so are other hybrid mothers. And I've actually approached Graham angrily, but, lovingly, in the same, and he's been very sheepish and said, we know it's a side effect, we're terribly sorry, we've made you sick, we can't do anything about it. So don't think they're gods who know everything or their medicine's amazing. Better than ours, but there are still issues. They gave us IVF, they gave us 3-parent babies, they gave us laparoscopies, they gave us gene splicing, they gave us chromosome testing, all that's come from their breeding experiments. So a lot of good has come out of it for the future of humanity as well as them. Definitely cellular changes if we look under a microscope at the blood profile of abductees that all match. And as I said to you at the very beginning of this talk, the professor said to me, you've got the blood profile of an astronaut, and obviously you're not one. Common thread. I suggest that not only are the aliens monitoring those of us with DNA changes, but our world governments, I think they know exactly who they've got in their experiments. Why? So that greys and humans can blend together and greys can live with us on this planet. They want to take over, they just want to share it. But how much trouble do we have with other races, and how much trouble do we have with refugees and wars? And it's not such a great place for someone who doesn't look like us. So imagine a fully grey person, apart from they'd get sick, trying to be in this room right now. What do you think would happen? Security guards would come in, people would scream, people would faint, people would run up and want to touch them. So we're not really ready, but let's hope we're getting more ready, and that people like me can encourage others to come out and say what they've seen, and that we'll become ready, and with any luck it will become normal. So yeah, somebody has asked me if the program is reaching its conclusion. I don't know, but it's worth pondering, isn't it? All right, well, thank you very much. It's lovely to meet you.